Hi, all. My name is Meebs Aslam, and I'm the parliamentarian here at Austin Young Democrats. I'm here with Dyana Limon-Mercado, and this is an interview before we do our county judge endorsements. Dyana, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for county judge before we start with the questions?
Sure. I'm Dyana Limon-Mercado. I am currently the executive director of Planned Parenthood Texas Votes, which is a statewide advocacy organization representing Planned Parenthood patients and health centers across the state. I'm also the immediate past chair of the Democratic Party, where I was elected to represent our greater Democratic community here. I also have an MBA in international business as well, and have been working in public policy and politics for over a decade, particularly around criminal justice reform, healthcare, transportation, women's rights, etc. I'm running for county judge. We are at a moment where our community is calling for bold, new, courageous leadership, and where people are asking for new voices and new perspectives and lived experience to be represented throughout our government. We know representation matters, and I'm proud to be the person who is the first Hispanic person to ever represent our Democratic Party here. I would also be, if elected county judge, the first Hispanic person to ever hold that position, as well as the youngest person to ever hold that position, the youngest person to serve on our court, the first one of color, and many other distinctions. While I'm proud of the possibility of that, what it speaks to me is the lack of representation we've had throughout our government here locally. And I think it's really important that not only my voice, but the voice of others are represented. And I've tried to use every position I've had to bring other people to the table to help share their experiences and perspectives and to help craft public policy solutions together. So that's a little bit about why I'm running.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for diversifying TCDP and doing all the great work with them. I've been keeping up with everything. That's great efforts. Thank you. I think you're frozen. Alrighty, welcome back. And the first question that we had for you was, Travis County has taken a number of steps to promote diversion from incarceration. How effective have those efforts been, and do you support these efforts at expanding diversion?
Yeah, I think Travis County has done a good job, I think, innovating around different diversion measures. We have the Phoenix Court, the Veterans Court, some other specialized court, and some specialized diversion programs around mental health as well. I think all of those are good, and we should probably just continue to evaluate them and make sure that there's strong coordination between those diversion programs and the entry points we have in the system. For me in particular, I think that we need to look at more pre-booking, pre-charge diversion programs so that fewer people are actually coming into the system. A number of the diversion programs that we have are once you've been charged, once you've sort of begun the court process. And I think it's really important that we are looking earlier in the process, both when somebody is arrested, before they've gone to magistration, that they have access to be evaluated for other appropriate solutions around diversion without actually having to charge them and bring them into the whole system. For me, some of that also looks like some reforms around prosecutorial review of probable cause affidavits. I've actually worked in the jail. That was my first job right out of college, was working in the central booking facility. I thought what I was doing, what you were supposed to do when you graduate college, get a good job that has benefits and is stable. And so I worked with the city of Austin in the central booking facility. It was there that I saw a number of probable cause affidavits being written that was clear to me that people were not guilty of anything more than driving while black or walking while brown, and that there were just very inconsistent account of how events would happen. And so I think having prosecutorial review so that rather than somebody getting booked, getting charged, and being in the system for 2 years when cases ultimately get dismissed, maybe at the end because it's not a strong case, that we have prosecutorial review at the beginning and access to the public defender's office earlier in the beginning for people, so that maybe those cases never even get filed and they don't have to stay in the system for 2 years waiting for dismissal.
Awesome. And a related question to the same issue would be, we know that 10% of total 911 calls are related to mental health crisis, and this shows that there is a significant mental health need that is unmet. What resources does the county provide for citizens struggling with mental health, and what ways would you improve as county judge on these measures?
The county provides actually quite a bit around mental health already. There is some pre-arrest diversion work that's happening, some post-arrest diversion work happening. some ongoing monitoring, both through court monitoring and through community monitoring that happens in outpatient programs as well. I think all of that is good. We also have Integral Care here, which is like our provider of mental health services. The most frequent thing I hear in the community around mental health is that it's not well coordinated.
Right.
The Integral Care may be a good provider and maybe meeting some metrics, but they're very siloed from the rest of the network of mental health providers and community partners who are trying to serve that community. So I think part of that is sort of how the laws are written. So Integral Care actually gets to be both the body that plans for the work and budgets for the work, and they also implement the work. So right now they're currently set up to be very siloed. So we have to do some work to sort of undo that, bring in the rest of the network together and build really an infrastructure that is well understood, not only from the providers doing the work, but from the community who needs access to it, is the other part. There's lots of good programs we have, both in terms of diversion, in terms of mental health, but sometimes people just don't know how to access those things, and they don't have literacy or confidence. It can also be intimidating to interact with different governmental bodies. So there's a lot of work we have to do around community outreach and coordination to make sure that those relationships are there, both with providers and people who need access.
Perfect, thank you. So next question we have related to the women's jail, also part of the criminal justice reform subject. And so Travis County is moving forward with plans to design a $79 million women's jail by starting negotiations with a design firm. Despite data showing that there is an overall decline in jail bookings due to pretrial diversion programs. What is the status of this project, and do you support the funding of the construction of this new women's jail?
The status of the project is that it is currently in limbo right now. So the Commissioner's Court did approve initial funding to engage 2 design firms to help put together the bigger plan about what the jail could look like in regards to what the intentions of how the new jail would function. The process with both of those design firms has not proceeded. From what I understand, it was just not a good fit for the county and the county's vision in the sheriff's office for what they were looking for. And so now there's a question about sort of where do we go in this process? And there is the very real issue of that we've seen a significant decline in our jail population, particularly around COVID, because more people are being released on cashless bail. So really our judges are finally taking some really meaningful and significant steps towards ending the over-reliance on cash bail. So that's like first and foremost, such an important part of what's been done, that it's been a positive move in COVID around criminal justice reform, and we need to continue to expand that and work with our judges to do that work. It's ultimately in the judge's discretion, the actual judges, the judicial judges, not the county judge position, about how they're implementing the cashless bail process, personal or cognizant bonds. So setting that vision with them about what it looks like to move away from cash bond, and making sure they're all on the same page, I think is an important part of that. Funding for the women's jail, I've talked extensively with community advocates around this. I am all for decarcerating Travis County, ending mass incarceration in Travis County. I understand what it means to create another building when we are trying to not incarcerate as many people anymore. So why are we creating a building that has more beds, right, and is built for our past vision of criminal justice reform versus our future criminal justice reform? The questions I have are just, I think that as a community, we should come together, both advocates and justice planning, to understand what's the vision we're working towards. So do we actually think, in 3 years' time that our goal would be to have a jail population of no more than 500, 1,000 people, and that we would want a facility that has no more than 1,500 beds or 2,000 beds combined all together? What time frame do we need to develop and execute that vision on, and then making sure once we get there that we have the appropriate facility to do that? The other issue is that the current jail, when you talk to certain people and when you look at the facilities report, is that the concern is that the current jail is really inadequate. It has unsafe conditions, inhumane conditions, right? And we don't want people who are currently incarcerated to be experiencing inhumane conditions or unsafe conditions. And also for the jailers that work there as well. I've worked in the jail, so it is hard to provide a safe environment for others, right, if your facility doesn't provide you with what you need and is not in good shape. So with all of that said, I think it's I personally am not in support of more funding for more jails or new jails or bigger jails. I think we should move to decarcerate Travis County. At the same time, we do have to provide adequate conditions
Right.
in jail. And so I think planning that out of like, is it 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, 8 years, we think we can get to reducing the population if we're able to put all of these reforms in place to reduce the jail population to X. And what does it mean to build a building that serves that population at that time? And in the meantime, are there just repairs we need to make to the existing building, which I've heard from some side that it's, you know, some things are beyond repair, it's too costly to repair. But if we're just looking for an interim period of time, maybe that is a short, a stopgap solution.
All right. Makes sense. So just to clarify, you would support funding the new jail as long as there is like limits on how many, if we're not increasing, you know, mass incarceration, as long as we're updating the facilities and making sure that they have adequate resources?
I mean, I personally am against funding for a new jail. I am one of 5, so I have to find 2 other votes with me as county judge.
Awesome.
And I think how we get there is by making a plan for what is the jail population we're actually trying to get to, and how do we make sure when we get to that population we have the appropriate sized facility that provides safe conditions for them. Awesome. I would like to know that, okay, we're not building this jail now, but does that mean we need to build a smaller jail in 5 years or 8 years? Because by then we think we'll be at sort of an adjusted space in our criminal justice reform. Or are we going to build this jail now and it's the last jail we're going to build for 40 years for Travis County? Like I said, my one vote would be to not provide any additional funding to expand our facilities right now, but we need 2 other votes. And I think we get those 2 other votes by really building a vision with the community of what criminal justice reform and decarcerating Travis County looks like.
Awesome. Well, thank you. A related question, what is harm reduction and how can it be implemented in Travis County?
Harm reduction, I'm sure you all know, it is a means of providing safer circumstances for people who are drug users or drug addicts. So in some places it can look like other communities providing things like a place that has, you know, medical oversight while people are using intravenous drugs. Also, it looks like other things like providing safe and sanitary supplies to people who are intravenous drug users, and making sure that, that it's not, there's no stigma related, that we acknowledge people's realities and that we we meet them where they are in terms of helping to build safer communities, recognizing the situations and the addiction that they're facing. Travis County, I think community partners have done a proactive job in trying to create solutions around this. I know AIDS Austin is really involved with harm reduction, the local harm reduction coalition that we have as well, and some volunteers and some medical communities that have been engaged through that. I think there's more always that we can do, again, really around coordination and awareness to make sure that people know how to get involved with this from the provider side, and understand like how we're coordinating different people who may be connected to this network as well, to make sure that we're just providing as safe a community as possible. For me, I work for Planned Parenthood, have worked for Planned Parenthood for 10 years. Non-judgmental, confidential, reducing stigma, those are all things, and bodily autonomy are all a part of like my fabric as an advocate every single day, no matter what the issue is. So to me, it's important that we meet people where they are and provide as safe a community and conditions as we can. Can you give me just 1 second? My baby monitor is on in the background.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I could hear my little one playing in her room because the baby monitor is on me.
All good, all good. Well, you're talking to us about Planned Parenthood, and thank you so much for all the great work that they do in providing, you know, healthcare, non-judgmental healthcare and access to resources to everyone. And with that, what is restorative justice and how can it be implemented in Travis County?
Restorative justice is a philosophy for how we approach restoring justice to the community, and involves both victims and people who have been incarcerated or who have perpetrated crimes, as well as people within the criminal justice system, to co-develop solutions for how we restore justice to the community as a whole. It means that not only looking at justice for victims, also looking at justice for people who have been incarcerated, charged, and that we're actually making the community safer as a whole together. I think, me personally, I've taken the approach in different settings around restorative justice that like we should start with the victims first, people who have been harmed. And also we have people who have been harmed by the criminal justice system, right? Like people who were wrongfully accused,
Right.
People who have been, right, victims of the systemic racism within our system. And so starting there of what of justice looks like, and it's different for all types of people. Some people want something that's very public, and other people want things that are very personalized and private, right? Like justice doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. So really creating sort of more customized settings for what does it mean for sexual assault survivors, right? And one survivor doesn't speak for all survivors. So really thinking through that in a way with the community, with different voices and perspectives, along with people who have committed those types of crimes, and figure out, okay, we need to both provide justice to victims and make them feel welcome and supported in our community and make them feel safe in their community. What does that system look like? Also, we can't, all right, people are not disposable. They're still going to be here. People who have, paid their debt to society and actually want to get on the right path, and how do we support them to be able to do that, and making sure that both sides feel respected, and that justice has been brought back to the community and restored, and collectively through that process that we're making the community safer.
Thank you. In talks about equity, how do you plan on making the Commissioner's Court more accessible to the working class? Currently, Commissioner Court meetings are on business hours during Tuesday, which excludes a lot of working folk.
I think we've seen some interesting attempts at accessibility around COVID, right? Both in terms of the city government and the county government. I think we should continue to move those things forward. I've heard wonderful suggestions around changing just the timing of the meetings, right? If we're not on the business day on Tuesday, if we could have those on a different weekday in the evenings, or the same weekday in the evenings. How do we also, the public engagement process is also really hard. I'm sure as an advocate, it's come down to the county commissioner's court or city hall, and you have to wait an endless amount of time, and maybe you get 2 minutes to speak, but you have no idea if that's going to be 2 hours in or 8 hours in. So I think figuring out some pieces around that have been helpful around COVID, thinking about giving people other means to engage, right? That we can call in, we can video in, and figuring out what that process looks like in the public input process. Also just simple things, if you want to send a message to the commissioner's court about a particular item, it's you have to seek the item out on the agenda, and then you have to go find your commissioner, and then you have to get their email address, and then you have to sort of craft the email. And then you have to do that 5 times if you want it to go to the whole court. And then it's not necessarily part of the formal record on that agenda item because you didn't come during the set time. We obviously have a lot of parameters around the public input process and what is actually considered part of public input. But I think it's simple things. If we had the agenda of here are all the items, and if you would like to send a message to the entire commissioner's court on it, click here. And when you click, the form is already filled out for you. You can put in favor, for or against, and then add a personal message, right? But it's we can take out those 5 extra steps you would have to do as an advocate just to get your public input in by email. But that's something we could be able to implement easy on our side as the court. A lot of advocacy groups take that on. That's what I do, for Planned Parenthood is, when issues coming up at the legislature, send a message to your member. We have access to be able to create those back-end petitions that then go to every member. But it seems to me that's something that government could easily do themselves. We don't have to wait for advocacy groups to create the back end to make it easy for you to click and make your voice heard. So I think things like that, making public comment more accessible through things like this, digital phone, and then thinking through things about things like the timing of the meeting. And then also community roundtables. The southeastern Travis part of the Travis County is one of the most underserved in the entire community by lots of measures: health measures, education, economic opportunity, income, etc. That's actually the part of the district I'm from. So if I was to be elected, I'd be the first county judge to ever come from precinct 4. Most of our county judges have come from precinct 2 and precinct 1. When I came in as party chair, I also noticed that precinct for the southeastern part of the county, which is like Del Valle around the airport, et cetera, was the only part of our county that did not have a regionally based Democratic club. So we have far northwest progressives, we have north by northwest progressives, Pflugerville Dems, Mater Dems, Central Austin, West Austin, Circle C, Blue Action, right? Like all of the groups, but there was nothing in the southeastern part of the county. So I worked with our precinct chairs in the Southeast to help promote and encourage and support them in developing a new club, which they did, which is the Southeast Democratic Alliance. So they now have that avenue to use to help engage other volunteers in the community and get them engaged in our civic and democracy work. I also talked to Judge Eckhart about that early on, that like there's this really big gap in the southeastern part around civic engagement. It's also some of our lowest turnout precincts in terms of voter turnout. What I know through my work through healthcare and on elections is that civic engagement and healthcare outcomes and economic outcomes are all correlated. It's not necessarily, it's not cause related, but it's correlated. So people, right, who are experiencing better health are more likely, or have access to healthcare, are more likely to be the type of people that engage in voting, and who engage, have more opportunities in economic and education. And so connecting those things together is really important part to promoting, right, every issue. So I worked with Judge Eckhart to help coordinate the Southeast leadership team, which brought together advocates who are working on flood mitigation in the area, food insecurity, schools, emergency planning, democratic issues, voter registration, to all come together and start to collaborate and think about how we could collectively promote the Southeast. And that was directly, right, Commissioner Gomez was there, county judge was there, county staff was there to hear directly from the community. So I think making sure that we're having, several meetings a year like that around different parts of the community, but where we're asking all of the advocates to come together, meet each other, hear from the county, let us hear from you. So even if you can't make the meetings downtown, every week or for every issue that you care about, you have an opportunity where it's not just people coming to the commissioner's court, but it's commissioner's court going out into the community.
Definitely makes sense. Thank you for increasing civic engagement in underrepresented communities. That's really important. And accessibility is also, you brought up a lot of good points. I have personally had a lot of trouble going to, City Hall or to testify at the legislature, because I might be working or I might have some other things to do. So it's like, we need more digital options or write-in options that are accessible to like the average person.
The other thing for me is the sort of intimidation factor.
Right.
So
for sure.
coming, right, just knowing like, where do I go? Where do I park? Right. Where do I walk into? Where's the right room? Am I standing in the right place? Did I sign in on the right sheet? What do I do when they call me?
Business suits, you're like, am I supposed to be here?
Yeah.
Right.
So, right, like all of those are deterrents to people.
Mm-hmm.
They care, and even if they have time to go. So in our work at Planned Parenthood, we strive to have patients advocate for themselves, right? And they're uninsured, underinsured, regular folks like us, mm-hmm. Who've never been involved in government before and never been to the Capitol. And so for us, we implement programs around the year to really get them comfortable ahead of that process. So we take them to the Capitol, we take them on a tour, we show them where things are, like, here's where you would park, and then you walk here, and here's where the restroom is, in case you're here for a long time. When we invite people to come to the Capitol, it's things like providing food and water for them while they're there, letting them know where the nearest places are that they can eat. If they get called up to testify, what to expect, and that they have an opportunity to like role play and sort of go through that process before they actually ever get there. But to help, break down just those barriers of intimidation and helping to grow people's confidence in the process.
Awesome. Well, that is good work. Thank you for that. And now we're going to pivot to economy. So Austin's economic development deals often come to dominate news cycles. And for example, Amazon didn't choose to move to Austin because of the city refused to incentivize the move, though Apple moved into the location they were considering when Williamson County incentivized their move. Tesla was recently deeply incentivized by Travis County. And should Travis County pursue economic deals, and is the process to access those deals adequate?
The Tesla deal was obviously multifaceted and had a lot of components to it. What I think was interesting about the Tesla deal was it was not like some of the other deals we've had around some of our other higher profile, high-tech employers coming into the area. I think what was unique about Tesla is, one, they were going into the Eastern Crescent, which is like our, biggest area of economic need in terms of economic development, other employers and communities around that. And also the types of jobs that it was bringing in, which I believe was 700 or 800 jobs that do not require a 4-year degree. So skilled labor jobs that all start at least $15 an hour, and that also provide healthcare benefits and paid sick time off. And that also includes janitorial staff and food service staff, as well as actually people employed in the factory itself. So I think all of those things were good moves. And I do think it's important that the county be involved in economic development for those reasons, because, we've identified areas of needs. We were just talking about the Southeast. There's other needs, further out. And the Tesla factory would be in Precinct 1, which is also an area that is, underutilized and has great need around economic development. I don't think the process was adequate. I think you'll hear me talk a lot, and I do think it's the thing that's most significantly different about me and my opponents, is community engagement is first and foremost for me. And that it's not that we've created some backroom deal and people don't really know when the meeting's happening, but they know conversations are happening. And then we get the deal released to the public, and then we all get 2 minutes to speak, but maybe you can't get downtown for the 2 minutes. And then we all say we don't like it, or these are the problems that we have. And then they take the vote at the end of the meeting, and it got approved anyways, right? Like the deal was already baked. So for me, it's making sure that people are included earlier in the conversation, throughout the conversation, that we're reporting out on those conversations as well to key stakeholders and advocates. I think communities and neighborhoods and the people first and foremost impacted by these things need to be a part of how these deals are shaped. So it's talking to people who are members of that community, who live in those neighborhoods, who are the types of workers that would work in those jobs, who have, kids in the area, and how this deal will impact our schools, right? And our transportation infrastructure as well. So I appreciate the great work that our elected officials do, and our policy experts do, and the research experts do. But to me, those people who are firsthand impacted need to be a part of those conversations and crafting those solutions. Because as much as I care about many issues and advocate and have experience on things, I don't have every lived experience. I don't live in that particular precinct where that factory is going to be built. So I have a topical understanding of what the issues are around economic development, infrastructure, and taxation. Right, we really need a couple people from the community that can help us as we're like making the sausage, to understand how does this impact their day-to-day lives, not just on paper, but in reality.
Thank you. We definitely need to increase more engagement in these processes to make it more equitable. I definitely agree with that. And this economic deal is definitely going to also affect the housing problem that we have in Austin. So Travis County has a wealth of natural beauty that is threatened by greenfield development. Last year, Travis County courts were used to stop the city of Austin from increasing residential density, which put a greater pressure on Travis County outside of Austin to provide housing supply for those pushed out of the city limits. How can Travis County respond to the lack of affordable housing in Austin and push for a regional response to Central Texas's housing needs?
There's a lot to unpack there around housing.
Sorry about that. We can start with the increasing the courts stopping City of Austin from increasing residential density.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to talk through that litigation as it was sort of happening. It was obviously not the outcome a lot of people wanted to see, but it's hard to get involved in somebody's like judicial philosophy, but it was really like their reading of how like the rules were not followed, and not necessarily an issue of like what the politics were around the land use development code. So I think going forward, we just have to know there's going to be a lot of resistance to all of these things, and everybody on both sides wants transparency and fairness and making sure that we're following the rules that we're. I am a big proponent of small d democracy, even when it doesn't yield the results that I personally would like, but I think it's the most important part of the process. And I do think with fairness and transparency built in that we all benefit. In advocacy circles, they know me to be an advocate for radical transparency, and that makes a lot of other people really nervous. But I don't hold back I try to give all of the pieces of information that I'm weighing in decisions to the whole community to help me think through it. Because again, I don't think, first read that I necessarily have, that I'm going to have the best read of it, but I try to be open to education and open to hearing and to be very thoughtful in how I'm interpreting situations and to asking for feedback from all different sides and weighing the impact on different communities and how we're getting to the greatest good for the most people. So for me, I do believe in radical transparency. I will tell you that scares a lot of people when you're like, you want more people in the room. You want us to tell people what the conversation is. You want to tell them what somebody else said. I'm like, yes, like I honestly believe we are a stronger and better community when we get out of the silos and when we get out of the secret conversations. Like if we're not doing anything bad, then we're not doing anything bad. Like we're all trying to do good. So let's just do it together. In terms of Travis County providing more affordable housing, I think there's a lot more we can do, particularly with our public improvement districts, which exist to encourage affordable housing. I would like to see, there's been some effort put into public improvement districts and affordable housing, particularly like in the Eastern Crescent. But I think that's not the only people want to live in affordable housing, right? Like,
Right.
And the other thing is like we have a lot of people who live in the Eastern Crescent or the eastern half of the county, but right, they live downtown, they work south, they work west, and so they work north. And so we need to make sure that we're creating affordable housing options for people all the way around the county, because people, if they want to, should have the option to live where they work and not to have to commute 45 minutes or an hour across town or across the county to be able to get to their job. For working families, right, it gets even more complicated if you're trying to go to school and work, or if you have kids you're trying to drop off and pick up. So, people should be able to live their whole lives wherever they want, and they should have options and not just you can only afford to live in this part of the county, but we need you to work way over here and support this other community.
So the last issue that we're going to tackle is climate change. That's one of the most existential issues for every person on Earth right now. As county judge, what will you do to help mitigate this crisis, especially in Travis County?
Yeah, I'm definitely open to hearing more. I know ground level ozone is like the #1 issue we face in terms of air quality. It's something my family deals with. I have asthma. Both my kids have asthma. My youngest has chronic respiratory issues, right? And that's not uncommon for families here. We have really poor air quality, particularly with particle pollution, both from emissions and also from things like quarries that we have in the region and gravel quarries, et cetera. I thought that was, just to tie these two things together, like in the Tesla deal, Tesla being put where it is now likely means that the quarry that is there, the gravel quarry, is going to have to be relocated or, moved.
Right.
And so while we're getting jobs in, we're also pushing out a polluter that has affected the air quality in the community for the kids. So that was a part of the deal that I didn't think was like covered very much about how those two things were playing together. But I think is important for us to understand too, is like, I get really frustrated when people take like environment separate from economic development, separate from like healthcare, and like all of those things for me work together.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think there's more we can do. I know the county does have great programs. We're not the greatest at advertising what those are and people understanding how to get involved. And I would love to hear more from our environmental activists here, particularly our young environmental activists. I think we've had a conversation that has really been propped up and driven for a long time by advocates from like the SOS community. And I think they've done great work, right, and really like tried to hold our community and our elected officials accountable. But I want to hear from the Sunrise Movement, and what young people are thinking about how we address these problems and how we're including their voices, right, and thinking about their lives and their families for the next 50 years as we're solving these problems. But we definitely have, a lot more we can do around emissions. I think the other thing around COVID is, the conversation around public transportation is, key part of this as well. Transportation not separate from our environmental impact. And we're having this conversation around Project Connect and how we're getting more people moving and creating a more robust public transportation system that more people will use, and how that benefits our whole community, both in terms of environment and in terms of just quality of life for commute times, et cetera. But I think the other part of that is in COVID, we've seen like how many people can actually work from home.
Mhm.
And so, and what a great impact that's had both on our environment and on our roads and getting people off the roads and same quality of life. And so, how can the county be a partner in encouraging more telework options among our employers, our biggest employers, and at the county itself? I think will be a really big part of reducing emissions and improving our air quality too. I know that Travis County is like, ranked one of the best places to work for like commuters, but like I want to be the best place to work for like teleworking.
That would definitely be
And
interesting.
I mean, the other part of that too is right, then we have to provide the IT infrastructure
Mhm.
for that so that all of our homes and all of our families can have access to right high speed internet and devices, and then we don't have the digital divide creating more inequity in our community. So that's something that we should be considering too.
For sure. And do you have any plans for inevitable energy and inevitable emergencies, including fire, flood, drought, etc.?
Yeah, I think definitely around expanding our emergency services, which I think has been such like an important shift in the conversation around how we're divesting from criminal justice and reinvesting and reallocating in the community, and emergency services is like such an important part of that, both in terms of like EMS and fire particularly. The county, in partnership with the city, I think has done a good job over the last couple of years to try to expand services and make sure that there are fire stations, EMS stations in some of the places that there had been gaps for a couple of years. So I think continuing to work on those is really important, and making sure that we're moving away as hopefully we're able to shift those away from criminal justice reform to putting those into other services that actually make our community feel safe as a whole, and that protect against these things that we're going to be having to deal with because of the climate crisis anyways. My parents live in a floodplain. It's actually in Caldwell County. So my parents experience a pretty significant flood every couple years. My dad's also a volunteer firefighter. So there have been times where my dad is out trying to rescue people from their homes and keep them safe. And at the same time, my parents lost everything when their home was flooded. And when they first moved into their home 20 years ago, it was like, they knew they could expect a big flood once every 5 years, and it would, they were prepared for it. A little bit of water. They had a whole
Right.
system to how they do that. But right now it's gotten more frequent. Now it's like every 3 years, every 2 years,
Mhm.
and it's going to get worse. They have to make a decision if they're going to continue to live their life like that, or if they have to leave their home.
For sure. Yeah, with the climate change happening so rapidly, we're going to see a lot of emergency plans that we are going to need to implement.
Yeah, and the southeastern part again of the county is the part of the county that experiences some of the most significant flooding in the Onion Creek area. And so I think the county's done good work in the flood buyout program and partnering with the city to help those families that are ready to make the transition to somewhere else in our community to be able to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Diana. That's all the questions we have. And thank you for participating in the Austin Young Democrats endorsement process.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for having me. I am such a big fan of the Austin Young Democrats. I've really enjoyed getting to work with you all and learn from you all and hear from you all. I appreciate, as county chair, people ask me what, has been the best part of this work. And honestly, it's being accountable to the community. As an advocate, I was always on the side of holding our elected officials accountable, and now serving as party chair, receiving the accountability work. And I've actually really enjoyed and appreciated that work, because I think it's such a big investment from the community and from young people to be involved, and to hold our elected officials accountable. And I've just really appreciated the way y'all have approached that work with me and helping me to learn and listen. I am 39, so I'm on the end of the young Democrat scale. But I would hope that I would love to represent our younger residents in Travis County and be the youngest person, I think, to ever serve on a Travis County Commissioner's Court, and the youngest county judge as well.
Well, thank you for including us in the part of your conversations. That's all we're hoping for. Thank you for that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. I'll talk to y'all soon.